Thank you very much, Madam. This concludes the inaugural session. We shall reconvene in about 10 minutes' time at 12 p.m. India time and 9:30 a.m. Yemen time for the first plenary session. Thank you all and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Well, thank you, everyone. So we will have less than 5 minutes break. Then we will start the academic sections and the academic sessions, starting by the first plenary session by Professor Hari Haran, the professor and head of the English Language Institute at University of Kerala. So let's make sure that Professor Antar Sulaihi from Egypt. Professor Antar, are you available? We need to check the sound with you. You are going to be the second speaker of the plenary session today. Sir, you can unmute yourself. There is an icon, it looks like a mic.
Yeah, okay. Can you get me now?
Yeah, you are very audible, very wonderful. Welcome from Egypt, the land of the
Sure. Sure, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Jamil, and thanks for all the professors.
You can unmute yourself now. You can mute yourself.
Okay.
So let's check also Professor Ivy Song. She is going to speak also today in the third session, in the plenary session. Professor Ivy Song, are you available? Yes, she is there. Could you please unmute yourself and we can do a test for the sound? Okay.
It is here.
Yeah. Hello, good morning, dear ma'am.
Good morning.
Yeah, it is okay. Look, now here in India, it's around 12 o'clock. In Yemen, it is now 9:30. So we have three different timings. Thank you. So now I would like to start the occasion of plenary session.
Welcome back. Thank you all. Now let us start the plenary session 1. The speaker is Professor B. Hariharan from Department of English. We used to call it Institute of English, and he is the head of the department, and he is the director of University Area Studies Center of Canadian Studies, and he has completed 2-3 major projects by UGC as a member of editorial team of preparatory introductory course material on Canadian studies. He has published many books, and he has authored some books on Malayalam as well. He translated some Malayalam books to English, and his area of interest are theatre, diaspora, translation, Canadian studies, CC graduate fellowship. He received a CC graduate fellowship in 92-93, and now he is going to speak on a topic which is very interesting. He speaks on the innovative topic called the diary an English teacher did not keep. I welcome Professor B. Hariharan for his plenary speech. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Shanwas. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. In fact, let me begin with a disclaimer. I am not very sure if disclaimers are permitted in a plenary presentation. Professor Shanwas had talked to me over the phone, and he tried to convince me that I must participate in this conference. But then I tried to get away from his hold, telling him that I am not an ELT specialist. I'm not a language specialist in that sense, who has got formal training on the teaching and learning of English. I am a very simple English teacher. But then he was very persuasive, and finally I did agree that I will do it. So, and I was not very sure as to what I will be doing, because I'm not trained in language teaching. I never studied ELT or even ESP for that matter. And I see here that there are about 125 participants who all have, in one way or the other, probably have had training in ELT and ESP. So I'll try to play my best foot forward. And so once again, let me thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this conference. So here we go. I thought I'll come up with, I was not very sure, like I said at the very beginning, as to the title of this presentation. And that's when I thought I'll try to formulate something like this: the diary an English teacher did not keep. I thought, I feel that this will try to explain the kind of things that I do as an English teacher. I would like to take off from three very interesting, very crucial things that Professor Ajay Kumar said while he inaugurated this conference. The first thing that I feel is very, very important is this: that English has become a world language. It is not that English is a world language. And I would like to emphasize on that word become, because this word become, I think, has a lot of echoes in what I'm trying to develop. And the second one has to do with the kind of strategies, the way in which different situations demand of us teachers very different strategies. So I will touch upon some of those areas, and then I would say that he hit the nail right on the head when he talked about the way in which we all need to believe in the kind of experience that we have, which we accrue over the years. Our experiences make us better. This is what he was trying to tell us. So I'm going to bank on those three things to develop what I feel is the argument that I have. Um, when I started my career as a teacher, I was confronted in a way, like many of us, with this question of establishing how important it is, rather, to establish the foundation of language learning in a very systematic manner. Now, this is something that we all would agree that we all are trying to do, that we need to teach language in a systematic manner. But then I think as I started my career, I realized that there is much more in trying to understand what the systematic manner is all about. What has this to do with the kind of systems that are there around us and the kind of systems that we create as teachers? Generally, what we do in a classroom, I am going back to the days when I was teaching pre-university students, students who had passed their 10th standard and were preparing 2 years to do their undergraduate course. Or even in high school for that matter, we generally teach them rules. There is something called rule-based language teaching. Things have changed a lot, but then from there, I assume we all migrated, graduated, developed something called full-fledged ELT courses, which are offered. I've never had the fortune of doing any ELT course. So here I am, here is a person trying to kind of skim through the whole thing. We discovered new ways of teaching and learning English. I think that is the whole adventure of teaching a foreign language or a second language, where we discover new ways of doing things. There have been a whole lot of developments in the area of teaching and learning English. But then, what I would like to emphasize here is not that there are these many developments and that these are the developments. What I am personally more interested, more fascinated, has to do with the things that go into this development. And I would pick up only one particular thing here. That is how all these developments are in a way contingent on a variety of needs and professional requirements. So I think here it's very important to recognize the players who are involved in the whole process of language acquisition. So I would say that it is contingent very much on the needs, on the variety of needs, because the classroom, for example, the learning situation could be very, very heterogeneous. It is very heterogeneous. It would have very many factors, right? So the needs are very important, and then the kind of professional requirements, the kind of things with which we, not that we are equipped, we kind of learn to equip ourselves, depending on the kind of needs that are there. Now, this is the first part of what I'm trying to say. I have 5 more parts to my presentation. Now, what this leads to is the creation of a niche. There's a niche now. Now, what is this niche? It is a niche now that the English teacher discovers. It's not that it's already there. It's a niche area of experience that you think you discover. And one particular area that I would like to briefly mention here, a niche area that we did discover, happens to be ESP. It's a niche area. This is an area that we discovered because we're talking about English for specific purposes. And specific purposes can be many, many things. So we would have English for this, English for that, for business, for nursing students, for a whole lot of things. So it is very, very need-based. So this is why I said that it's very important to discover, to say that these are niche areas. But then these are niche areas that are already classified and already there. But then I think as teachers, we discover niche areas as we go into different classrooms. different classrooms create different niche areas. This is what I personally believe, what I've seen happening as a teacher. Now, what I'm going to do now is to briefly talk about my intervention in ESP. I have had no training in ESP or in ESP. Let me emphasize that. Now, for me, ESP is something very simple. I'm not going to complicate it at all. I'm trying to put it in very, very simple terms. For me, ESP is the specific purpose for which my student comes to the class. Let me repeat that. ESP for me is a specific purpose for which my student comes to the class. There could be many, many reasons for which a student would come to the class. There could be different reasons. But then why would a student come to my class? And what is it that this student wants from a class? Or why should this person come at all to my class? Now, this is a question that I've always asked when I did teach the undergraduate students for 3 or 4 years and postgraduate students for probably 2 decades. Certificate programs that a Center for English Language Teaching offers in my department, where we have had classes on Saturdays and Sundays. The age group of participants, of students who would like to come there could be teachers, there could be housewives, and the kind of things that we do in terms of language teaching. We generally talk about the 4 basic competencies: listening, LSRW, the 4 skills. I always tell the students that the most important skill, if one were to grade these skills, I would say is not writing or reading, but it is listening. Because when I speak, I must listen to what I am saying. Because if I do not listen to what I am saying, I will not know what I'm talking about or what is it that I'm saying. Because I need to listen. When I read something, I need to learn to listen with my eyes. And when I read, I need to listen with my eyes and with my ears. And if I have a problem, if I'm a differently abled person, then I learn to read with my fingers. I learn to listen with my fingers and with all my senses. So we listen with not just our ears, but then with all our senses. So that's why I said this idea of specific purpose and this creation of niche, I think, is a beautiful, beautiful discovery for a language teacher. So let me repeat this: the specific purpose for which my student comes to the class. And this is where I tell my student that listening is very, very important. Because if you do not listen, you will not be able to speak. If you do not listen, you will not be able to engage in a conversation. If you do not listen, you will never be able to ask questions. That is, I must learn to discern the multiple niche areas the students are willing to let you in. It's not that my area and I give it to you. I must be willing to listen to the niche areas in which my students permit me, allow me in. There could be areas where it would be difficult. There would be no entry for me. I'm sure all of us would have had this problem with students who are who probably are scared, who will not open their mouth initially, because that's their territory. We are talking here about animal behavior. It's the way in which dogs, for example, mark their territory. There are areas that they mark, and they will not allow you entry, another dog entry, or even you. There is something called territorial behavior. And this is something that I think we need to recognize as language teachers. There are territories that we fear, that we are scared of, that we guard. There are territories that we guard, and there are territories where we permit access. So this, I feel, is very, very important for a language teacher. Now, this world that the student inhabits, it could be their strength, it could be diffidence. I don't want to use the word weakness. There could be strong areas, there could be diffidence on the part of the student, there could be hesitation, there could be fear, there could be anxiety, or even plain unwillingness. So I think a lot depends on how much the student is able to allow you access to this. A lot depends on your engagement. Largely, what you do in an English classroom depends on this. And therefore, this diary of my English classroom is never written down on a daily basis. It's all somewhere here, I don't know. And there's a reason why it's not written down. Because that would come to the other part of language learning and language teaching. Let me tell an anecdote. There is this belief, and most of us would have gone through this. When we start writing, we feel that these are our thoughts and these are things that we have come up with, and we try to write it down. And when the teacher uses the red pen, we feel bad. Well, the teacher has marked this next mark, has stuck off something, because these are things that we have written. And we believe that whatever we write is written in stone. Well, we never write anything in stone, right? So this is one idea that I'm going to develop here. The second part of my presentation is this: why. There is a why. Why is it that I never kept a diary? I very much believe that the English classroom is constantly, always under erasure. The English classroom is always under erasure. The diary that I did not keep, therefore, was also under erasure. That is why I do not have a diary. The diary that I did not keep is also under erasure. The reason why I bring in this idea of erasure here, because it has a whole lot to do with the practice of teaching, the practice of learning a language. I've used this word from philosophy, but then I'm not going to talk about philosophy. But then I've used this term. I'm trying to put this in the way in which I understand this concept of erasure. So I talked about a diary that I do not keep. And so what is it that I did learn from the diary that I did not keep? Now, this is a question that I asked myself as I was preparing for this lecture. In the diary that I never wrote, I learned to write my experiences of correcting compositions of teenage students who would have studied in they would have studied Malayalam at home. They would be talking Malayalam at home. It could be Hindi, it could be Gujarati, it could be any other language. So I learned to write the experiences of correcting compositions of teenage students. Why teenage students? Let me begin with that. For students, generally, especially in the Indian scenario, I don't know how it is elsewhere in the world. In the Indian scenario, students have a very big problem with three things: preposition, tense, agreement. My teacher used to tell me that if you know how to use preposition in English, you can master English. So students have problems generally with tense, agreement, and preposition. I always feel that for students, these three are always under erasure. So what I do is, in my class, when I used to teach grammar, the nuances of how to convert present tense to past tense or whatever, I would ask my student to come to the blackboard, give this person a chalk piece, probably I'll write one sentence, and then I'll ask the student to correct what I've written or what a student has written. So the student would be standing there with a piece of chalk in front of the blackboard, and The students would come, keep on writing and rewriting and overwriting on what others have written. So you would write something, you would strike it off, or you might simply erase it. You would write again, and then the student will have to say what exactly his thought processes are as he tries to convert an active verb into a passive verb or whatever. So what happens there is, what I feel is that all of us at that point learn how to use language using the eraser. I think this is something that I learned to do, and I loved to do it. I still love to do it. So we learn how to use language using the eraser. This is something we don't have to really look up to the French philosopher Derrida to talk about erasure. This is something that all of us do all the time. So this is a beautiful, remarkable learning experience. Now, my learning stint as a young PhD scholar, for example, in the early 90s, taught me how I was erasing and writing over what I thought was my competencies in English. That's a big story. I will not go into it. There's a whole new way in which I learned how to write and discovered what competency in language is all about. And it goes back to this very, very central experience of not just writing, of erasing what I write. Language learning, I would say, is possible, I realized, only and only if the student recognizes the potential of erasure, not otherwise. What I'll do is I'll try to sum up all these things by talking about two very interesting experiences as a teacher. The first one happens to be the experience of supervising a PhD thesis. It has to do with writing. I started off with listening, and I'm going to talk now about writing a PhD thesis. There was a PhD thesis that I did supervise. This thesis was submitted in 2008 January. This was when I was teaching in the University of Mysore. I'll read out the title of this thesis: An investigation into the writing processes involved in the master's thesis in theology. The challenges faced and overcome by the unskilled L2 learner. This was a remarkable work in the sense that the person who was doing her PhD at that time, when she got her PhD, when she was doing her PhD, she was in her late 60s. And she had done her MA way back in the late 50s. So I was fortunate to do it, and I found this topic to be very engaging, and I picked up a whole lot of things working with Iris Devadasan, who was doing her PhD. Now, it was a beautiful experience where I could see how you learn to engage with the writing that your student produces. It was a very, very fascinating experience where she was trying to, in that study, she was trying to argue that thesis writing is a genre in itself, and how you can actually teach the writing of this genre or teach academic writing to students. So it was a fascinating experience. This is one thing that I would like to share. And the second one, I have about 2-3 minutes, I'll try to finish it. The course that I designed, which I started offering in 2019, this is something that I was dreaming of for about 2 decades. It was titled Academic Writing. All of us offer academic writing courses. I started offering it for the 2019 batch in my university. Now, I'll tell you very briefly about what this course is. Now, this course is all about how students learn to keep track of everything they rewrite, not just write. I make them keep a track of everything that they rewrite. So what I do is I encourage them to keep a portfolio of writing that adds and sheds the language learning process. It adds, and then it adds a lot, shapes the language learning process. So they would have at the end of the course a whole portfolio, which I encourage them to build on, to add as they go through the entire MA program. So what happens there is this: in those moments, one discovers the pleasure of using language, as we recognize that the nature of language is essentially priapic, because I feel that language is an absolutely remarkable shape changer. It's a remarkable shape changer, and that's why I would say it's priapic, and it's perhaps the greatest invention that we ever have had in the world. Now, I would like to conclude my presentation. I'll finish it in probably 30 seconds with reminding myself, rather, of a sentence from this remarkable great historian, G.M. Trevelyan. One sentence that he wrote way back in 1913 in a book titled Clio and Other Essays. I would like to, I always do this, I always tell this to myself and to my students, and I've stuck it in my rooms. I tell all my grad students and PG postgraduate students to read that and then think of writing, what writing is, understand what writing is. So I would like to sign off by reading to you what G.M. Trevelyan had said way back in 1913. This is what he says. He is a historian. He is not an English teacher. What is easy to read is difficult to write. The labor of writing and rewriting, correcting and recorrecting, is the due exacted by every good book from its author, even if he knows from the beginning exactly what he wants to say. A limpid style is invariably the result of hard labor, and the easily flowing connection of sentence with sentence and paragraph with paragraph has always been won by the sweat of the brow. This is from page 34. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Professor Hariharan. That was an insightful lecture about the process of erasure coming into play in the process of learning. And I think participants would take away this valuable lesson and perhaps use it to their advantage in their own teaching experiences. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Our second plenary lecture today will be delivered by Professor Antar Abdullah, who joins us from Egypt. To introduce Professor Antar Abdullah, I invite Dr. Amin Ali Al-Jamal. Dr. Amin.
Thank you, Mr. Pascar. Now, I will introduce Professor Antar Abdullah Subayhi from Egypt. Professor Antar Abdullah will speak on the topic, a brief history of English language teaching in Egypt over the 20th century. Professor Antar has obtained his MA in language teaching from South Valley University in Egypt, and he also got an MA in linguistics and translation theory from University of London, and the PhD in language teaching, South Valley University in Egypt. He also got a master's degree in religion and public life from Carleton University in Canada. He was a professor of applied linguistics at Taiba University in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and he has published 40 papers, including 10 publications in Arabic, and the publications were in linguistics, teaching English as a foreign language, and translation. He wrote 19 books on language, education, teaching, and literature. He translated 2 big volumes on teacher supervision and intelligence. He published more than 20 articles in newspapers and cultural magazines in English and Arabic. He is a reviewer in 5 international language education journals. He participated and presented at more than 30 international conferences and workshops. He taught and developed Arabic materials at the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, UK. In 1999, he participated in a training course for 6 weeks in USC at Cal State, LA, California, USA. He has supervised and examined more than 40 MA and PhD dissertations in Egypt and KSA. He has been teaching the applied linguistics in Saudi Arabia and in Egypt for more than 19 years. We welcome Professor Antar Abdullah to speak on his topic. You can unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amin Ali Al-Gamal, for inviting me over to this wonderful international virtual conference. So is my voice heard quite well?
It is fine, sir, but if you bring the mic more to your... okay, that's perfect.
So I say that I'm honored to be invited over to this international virtual conference in English language teaching and learning in the ESL, EFL settings, especially as it takes place in virtually between 2 international universities in India and in Yemen. And I'm adding my country over by participating in that and being part of that. It is now 9 a.m. in Egypt in the morning, and so it's a wonderful morning to be with you this morning. I would like to thank very much the chief patrons of the international conference and the coordinators and the heads of the departments of English and Linguistics and all the professors and all the colleagues and all the researchers who are attending this conference. When I was contacted by Dr. Amin on a topic for this international conference, and I knew that it would be run by both dear universities in India and in Yemen, the first thought that came to mind was that I will be witnessing a cooperation between the 2 language circles that late Professor Raj Kachro mentioned in his World English, is the outer circle of India, where English is a second language, and the extended circle where Yemen is using English as a foreign language. And so it was interesting to see how these 2 will interact together and how this will also lead to thoughts about integrating the language curriculum to represent the real status of English in the world, not just in the Anglo-American world, but in the world that is using English as a global language and not as an Anglo-American language. So I thought about giving you a brief history and a hint about the English as a foreign language in Egypt and how the history of imperialism, Orientalism, and colonialization has developed and shaped the way English is taught in Egypt in the present day, and how this will have also insights onto the future and how the future will be like. So I have developed a piece of PowerPoint presentation. I will see if this will be okay, shared with you. Okay, waiting for it to be shared. Okay. So the PowerPoint presentation now visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible. Please go on.
Okay, thank you. So I start by saying that Egypt and the West in general had a long history of conflict. Egypt with the heart of the Islamic world, and the West had always had a conflict with Islam and mainly the Arab world. There had been crusades through the medieval ages, and there have been like warfare between the two sides, the West and the East, for long. However, the first encounter of Egypt with the European modernity came in the near to the end of the 18th century and with the beginnings of the 19th century with the French campaign on Egypt, when Napoleon Bonaparte came to Egypt, and this French mandate just stayed there for 3 years. But these 3 years were very influential on the Egyptian history. Because just after the French left under the resistance of the people of Egypt at that time, their effect and their influence remained in the land of Egypt for a long time, and started with the strong man of Egypt, who is Muhammad Ali Pasha, and he had a French fascination. So he decided on sending the first scholarships over to France in order to study modern science, and based on the knowledge attained and the experience that the first scholars got from Europe, he started opening schools and establishing a modern system of education in Egypt. Not long after the French left Egypt, the Brits came to Egypt, and they had like two campaigns. The first one was in the beginnings of the 19th century, and it was also faced with resistance by the Egyptian people and the Egyptian Muslim army at that time, but their influence stayed after they have been kicked out. They returned back in 1882, and then at that time they stayed for more than 40 years. So while the French stayed only for 3 years, the British stayed for more than 40 years. And it is interesting how the practices of introducing the English language and the attitude towards education by the British colonizers were very similar to those used with the Indian people and the Indian peninsula or continent. So moving from this history to the history of curriculum, we have some excerpts from curricula that were used during that time. So in the early encounter with English language curricula, this was in the 19th century, and the main method that was used for teaching at that time was the grammar translation method. And these are covers and inside pages from sample books that were published in the Ottoman Empire, under the Ottoman Empire, and they were mainly used for teaching English through the grammar translation method. So the language of instruction was not the target language, it was not English, it was Arabic, the mother tongue. And the teaching focused on just showing the grammar rules of English and translating passages into Arabic and back from Arabic into English. And this was a wonderful linguistic training, in fact, for students to compare between the two languages at the early stages, in the primary stage, in the early 19th century. So from among the books that were used was this book, which is called Al-Bakura Shahiyya, or the nice beginning, the elegant beginning of learning English language. And as you may, or you can see that even on the cover itself, we have lines of Arabic poetry. So the author of that book is trying to make the students love the English language through tasting the Arabic language and then comparing between the two languages in a way of a contrasting linguistic analysis that was in its early forms at that time. There were lists like these, lists of words, and between the two inverted commas or the brackets, there were the pronunciation of the words in different language, different foreign languages, not just English. So there were the Turkish language, the Persian language, the English language, and sometimes the French language. For example, this is another book that was used, and it uses both the Arabic language and the French language, and in between we have the pronunciation of the French language in Arabic alphabet. The focus was on translation, and it was believed that translators are the real language learners, and the aim of learning the language is to produce proficient translators who can convey the message of the Arab world.
Excuse me, sir. We are sorry. We have someone, Abdul Qawi Ali. Please stop your presentation. Don't share the screen while the speaker. So, sir, you can share again, please. You can present again.
Okay, share again.
Now. Please, anybody, when you sign as not to present, just only to join. And while you are in the session, just please listen to the speakers. Okay, fine.
Okay, shall I go on? Okay. So this was just another example of how translation was very important at that time of history. And even conversation, I mean, like the productive skills, not just the receptive skills of reading and listening. We have also the productive skills of speaking and writing. They were also manipulated and used and employed through using translation and grammar. So we had grammar and then examples on the rules of grammar, pieces to be translated, and forms of conversation. But the conversations and the dialogues themselves are part of practices and exercises on the grammatical rules. So it's interesting to see that this book, for example, was published in Malta in 1840, which is like now more than 170 years or 80 years. And it introduced dialogues, long dialogues, detailed dialogues. And we had, for example, in dialogue number 1, we have people saying, "Good morning, sir," and then each word is translated beneath that, and then it was reformed in good Arabic structure next to that, so that the students will know the meaning of each word and then the meaning of the whole sentence all together. Translation was very important in the Arabic language with the means of instruction, and we don't know much information about how teacher training was done at that time, but we know that it was mainly translation tasks, and proficient translators were the proficient teachers. Then under the Egyptian kingdom, Egypt was part of the Ottoman Empire, and then after Muhammad Ali, it has been separated as an independent kingdom, although it was under the British occupation, but the king, the Egyptian king, was ruling Egypt. So there was a shift from just going to translation only to translation and something else, and we'll see this. But these are just examples of how translation was presented to students in the primary stages and in the early elementary schools at that time, in the beginnings of the 20th century. As the British thought about having new representatives from the colonies that they have occupied, they introduced the direct methods. And the direct method focuses on teaching English in English and focuses on teaching the oral skills more than the visual skills. The oral skills, the ones that use the tongue and the ear, or speaking and listening, rather than the eye in reading and the hand in writing. And in fact, this was the method that was used in teaching the first language. excuse me, it was used to teach the English language as a mother tongue to the British boys and girls in Great Britain. So it was the method that was introduced to teach English also in the colonies. So we had some examples of books like these ones, Studies in English Idioms or Introduction to Sound and Structure. And we will see even when time comes to reading and writing, oral skills were used and employed in order to present and train the students on the reading and the writing. What's interesting is that the introduction of the English language at that time was not starting with the English occupation. The British did not focus on education when they came to Egypt. They thought that to keep the colonized and the oppressed ignorant is better for the occupation. And then they rethought and found that based on their experience in India, to have representatives from the colonies would be a good plan. I have an example here from one of the books at that time. Let's see this one. Yeah, okay. So this is an excerpt from Thomas McCloy, who was a British politician in 1835, and he had the seat on the Supreme Council of India. He says we must at present do our best to form a class who may be interpreters. So the focus is still on translation and interpretation between us and the millions whom we govern, who will be persons Indian in blood and color, in our case Egyptians in blood and color, but English in taste and opinion, in morals and intellect. This is quite interesting that they moved from Orientalism, focusing on the literature of the country itself, to Occidentalism, which is focusing on the target language and trying to make the learner, who is also an obedient kind of follower of their own morals. Okay. The oral skills, as I said, for example, this book by Nisfield is about English composition. And while it is English composition, it is presented through oral exercises. So in order for the student, for example, to write a good composition, they need to go through some oral exercises first. Which may seem strange today because most of our students find it difficult to practice listening and speaking and find it easier to read and write. So in order to write, they don't need extensive oral exercises, rather they just need to have readings. But at that time, oral skills were the primary skills that were used, and this was the direct method that they implemented. Then Michael West, who was a linguist at Toronto University in Canada, came up with a new method, which was called the new reading method. And Michael West thought of introducing world literature, mainly English literature, in a simplified way through additional readings. So rather than intensive reading of passages, this would be extensive readings of extra readings or readers or supplementary readers. So he began to simplify some of the international world literature and thought that this will polish the taste and develop the character of the Indians and the Punjabi people. And he experimented this method at India first, and when it was a success, it was also carried over to Egypt. Until today, we have these readers that are additional. And we can see here, for example, this is one example of a reader. It's called the new method reader. It is the Michael West new method readers. This is Alan Quatermain, which was written by Sir Henry Rider Haggard. the author of King Solomon's Mines. And we can see, for example, from this copy, that the student was in a secondary school. It was in 1934, and the student uses his own stamp, and he's writing the date of the day and some meanings of words that he comes across. These are some other readers that were used also in Egypt and Sudan. At that time, Egypt and Sudan were one country, or both of them were under the British occupation. And Michael West was the person who introduced this type of extensive reading, extra supplementary readers. It is also interesting to note that English literature was taught through simplified readings in India and Egypt before it was introduced as a school subject to the British students themselves. The British students themselves in England used to study Greek and Roman literature, not English literature. And there were kinds of calls for introducing the English literature into the national curriculum. But the educators at Britain at that time thought that English literature was not suitable as comparable to the Greek literature. So they used English literature with the colonies, but not with their own country. And we have also another reference here, an argument by Guri Vosanthan, who observed that the young history of English literature as a subject of study is frequently noted. The irony is that English literature appeared as the subject in the curriculum of the colonies long before it was institutionalized in the home country, especially it was in India. Okay. So, getting back. In 1952, the British left Egypt and Egypt became an independent country. And Gamal Abdel Nasser was the president of Egypt at that time. And so Arab nationalism was the big name of the game at that time. From the 50s to the 70s, we had totally new curricula of English. So we had books that were written by Egyptians about the Egyptian civilization and the Arab culture, not written by British specialists, and not about the target language culture. We have here, for example, the flag. This flag of Egypt was the flag that was used when Egypt and Syria were united as one country. And we have here this poem for saluting the flag. And on the cover, we can see the obelisk in the temple, the Egyptian temple in the Nile, representing the national culture of Egypt. And through the 70s to the 90s, the same nationalist curriculum continued, but this time they changed it to the audiolingual method. And the audiolingual method focused on drilling, exercising, repetition, mimicry, and imitation. So there were long pieces of conversations where students had to memorize and to imitate and to practice hundreds of times. At that time, the example of the native speaker was the main goal of learning the language, not just to be a translator or to read the literature language, but to speak like the native speakers of the language. And CLT, communicative language teaching, came to Egypt near to the 80s and in the beginnings of the 90s. And at the time, we started to see integration of skills together. We started not just as an imitator of the native speaker of the language, but as a communicator with the native speaker of the language. And this happened, of course, because of the actions and the policies of the government at that time during the 90s and near to the 2000s. In the 2000s, we had CLT, which is Communicative Language Teaching, integration of skills, which focused on all the 4 languages skills all together, and with the final goal of communication with the other and not just imitation of the other. But Michael West's reading remained, and it is still till this day part and parcel of the English curriculum in Egypt. I end my presentation with some thoughts to think about. Why have I made this brief history of English language teaching and curricula in Egypt? This is the reason we need to think about. As we are now in the first quarter of the 21st century, we need to think and to have decisions and to agree upon what we mean by the foreign language learning goals. What is our goal for the coming period? Is it just to communicate, or more than just to communicate, to have mutual communication, not just to learn about the other, but to get the other to learn about ourselves, to be visible to the other, to be in the same position and status of the other, to understand and be understood, to speak and to be spoken to. We need, as Egyptians and Arabs in general, to have set goals and aims and objectives, very clear ones for the future course on English language teaching. We need also to focus more on the student-centered approaches. As we have seen, most of the curricula in this long history focused on the teacher as a model that the students have to follow, imitate, model for correction for them. And we need now to have more active learning approaches, student-centered approaches. We need to revisit students' errors, because students' errors is in fact a treasure of language learning methodologies and knowledge, linguistic knowledge for us as teachers and educators. Students' errors tell us about how students think, how they learn, what their mental processes are working like, and we can benefit from understanding and analyzing the students' errors and developing relevant courses for their needs, and that also cater for their areas that need perfection and training. We need to have a clear policy on teacher training, whether we will have teachers only in colleges of education, or we will have teachers in institutes of education where they are having just a 1-year training diploma after they finish a 4-year degree in humanities or in sciences. We need to think about which is better and which is more proficient and more effective for this country, to have a teacher trained or just a teacher developed in professional development, whether the sustainable professional plans will be enough or they need to be revisited. We need also to think about the testing and the evaluation techniques, especially as, for example, these days we are using the internet, and this conference is virtual. So the old paper and pencil way of testing and evaluation is no longer available, no longer beneficial. We need to think about new ways of testing and evaluation, taking into consideration the available technology and its developments. We need also to think about the research results. We have a treasure of dissertations in Egypt on the experimentation with language teaching and new methods of teaching the language and developing different language skills and capacities and competencies. But these results are all stored in the drawers and on the shelves, and they are not coming into reality or actuality in the schools and the public schools. Finally, we need to mold all of that within an Egyptian theory or an Arab theory for foreign language pedagogy, the principles of teaching that are derived from this long history and from also the Muslim and the Arab history, shared history of the region, and taking into consideration what benefits people in this area and what caters to their real needs. With this, I come to the end of my presentation, and I would like to thank you all for giving me this opportunity to share with you some of the history of my country and thinking about the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Antar Abdullah, for those insightful and remarkable, masterful presentation on the history of English learning and teaching in Egypt, starting from the translation method, the direct method, through simplified readings, ALT, CLT, and now the modern age, where a new approach needs to be sculpted by the Egyptians themselves in order to understand how best to tailor learning and teaching methods for the people of our own countries. Thank you very much once again, Professor Antar Abdullah, for joining us today. We hope to work with you again in the future, in future conferences as well. Thank you, Professor. Now for the third plenary lecture, it is my honor to invite Professor Ivy Song Jiayang from Xiamen University in Malaysia. To introduce Professor Jiayang, may I invite Ms. Urmila K? Ms. Urmila K, please.
Yes. Now, Professor Ivy Song Jiang, she is an associate professor and head Department of English, Language and Literature, Xiamen University, Malaysia. She took her PhD from College of Humanities, Xiamen University, China, in 2013. She is also a visiting scholar in Center for Learning Through the Arts, University of California, America, from 2006 to 7. She has published more than 15 academic works in highly recognized journals. In this session, she will be briefing English language education in China. On behalf of the conference team, I invite Professor Ivy Song Jiang to present her topic.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon. Some people are in the morning, some people are in the afternoon. First, I'd like to show my great appreciation to the organizers of the conference. You see, nothing can stop our communication. Without physical classes, the students can still learn in online classes. Any hardships, it brings us opportunity to reform. Therefore, it is very crucial for us to see the light rather than the miserable side in hard times. Light is hope. Hope brings us strength and wisdom to overcome difficulties and go on for the better. My today talk will cover 4 aspects. First, I'm going to introduce the situation of online English education in China. Then I'm going to introduce the pattern of non-professional English majors English teaching at Xiamen University. After that, I'm going to talk about the new tendency of telling our new story, our own story in English education in China. Finally, I'm going to share my exploration in English education. Since 1990s, online English teaching in China has been developed to be a kind of business. It has been a very big industry till now. The 2020 analysis about the status and the competition of the market for children English teaching shows that the market penetration rate for children in China to have online English learning is 22%. The number of online users is about 6 million. And the profit from this industry is about 26 billion. So according to the studies made by Wang Fang and Zhang Jinjian, till April 2019, 68% users of the online English learning are children from 4 to 8 years old. And the 28% users are those from 9 to 12 years old. The government has pumped money into the development of online English teaching. A lot of universities developed various platforms for students to learn English online free. The MOOC of universities in China has provided 386 courses for college English students, college English learners. The students from 709 universities have bigger selection in English courses from China University MOOC for free. Furthermore, the government still encourages universities to make as many courses as they can for the MOOC platform. It is predictable that more and more students from remote areas of China will benefit high-quality English teaching resources. Xiamen University is one of the leading universities in China. The College of Foreign Languages and Cultures of Xiamen University includes 5 departments. 2 of them are related to English education. One is aimed to nurture professional majors, while the other is in charge of the college English teaching for all the undergraduates and postgraduates. Today, there are about 40,000 students at Xiamen University. Among them, there are more than 20,000 undergraduates, more than 16,000 master graduates, and more than 4,000 PhD graduates. Apart from the professional English majors, all the other students are supposed to learn English as foreign language. Even the students who major in Russian, Japanese, French, German, and Spanish are also supposed to learn English as second foreign language. Then, how to deal with so many students English teaching? In 1998, my colleagues and I visited a private college in Dalian City. In their classroom, every student used an IBM laptop to get English knowledge and practice English language skills. They could communicate with their professor as well as their classmates. There was bigger selection for them to do class activities. Some of them were practicing listening and speaking, while others were practicing writing or reading. Whenever they had any question, they could inquire their professor online. So inspired by that teaching style, our university, Xiamen University, started to provide e-learning system for our students. Several years later, much more strategies have been taken. The pattern of half physical class learning and half online learning has been provided for all the non-professional English students. The students can practice listening, reading, and writing in online classes, and they can get feedback from the system automatically. For the physical classes, the students spend most of their time practicing speaking. Then, more reform of English teaching has been made at our university. Before 2015, all the students should have 4-hour compulsory English course per week. However, since 2016, the compulsory course time for physical classes has been flexible for different students with different English levels. Then, how is it flexible? After the new students enter Xiamen University, they are going to take English level exam. All the freshmen but art students will take the same exam at the same time. Then, the students will be divided into 4 level groups. For level 4 students, they don't need to take courses from level 1 to level 4. They will get an A mark for each level automatically. What they have to do is to select an elective related to English learning. Some lecturers will open elective course related to their own research, such as literature, philosophy, religion, drama, critical thinking, culture, history, and the like. The students just select the course or lecturers they are interested in. For the level 3 students, they are going to learn 1 semester compulsory English course and then elective. For the level 2 students, they have to take 3 semesters compulsory English courses and then elective. The level 1 students for getting Bachelor of Fine Arts are supposed to take 4 semester compulsory courses. They will not take any elective. And for the graduate students, the similar patterns are used, but of course, with fewer levels. Thanks to the pattern of half online and half physical learning and the level-based teaching, human resources of our university are saved a lot. That is the status quo of non-professional English majors, English education at Xiamen University. Apart from the reform in the delivery method of English teaching, the change of content of English teaching has been another tendency in China. In recent years, especially since 2016, some elementary schools have gradually adjusted the content of English language teaching from foreign elements to local stories. In some elementary schools, English course books with the content of China's culture, literature, and art have been used at experimental stage. Moreover, the government has paid much attention to the exploration about how to help and improve college students' abilities to tell China's stories in English. This year, the topic is formally listed as one of the special programs of the National Social Science Fund of China. In my English teaching career, my early research is about how to arouse students' motivation, learning motivation. When I have tried a lot of methods of arouse my students' genuine motivation, there were still 1 or 2 students' genuine motivation could not be fully aroused. Then I had done much more research. and a brand new subject stretched its helpful hand to me. This brand new subject was established in 1970s. Its name is drama education. One of the pioneers in this field was an English language teacher. Her name is Dorothy Heathcote. Later, she became one of the founders of the new subject, drama education. Being faced with a lot of young and sad faces after the Second World War, when she was only 16, Dorothy started to use English to teach English through drama. She created a method which is called teacher in role, and a teaching approach which is called mentor of expert. Teacher in role, as the name suggests, the teacher will take a role in class activities. Once the teacher is in a role of a story, all the members in the classroom can play a game together. And when they play a game, what's the relationship among them? They are playmates. Then a pleasant learning environment and process is created. As for the general meaning of mentor of expert, the learners have opportunity to become an expert at what they are exploring. For example, the students are assigned to be a theater or a drama presentation. We can give a theme for this assignment. It could be how to help your community to cope with the threat of COVID-19. First, the students will do careful research about the characteristics of COVID-19. Then they will go to find how other communities or other countries are coping with this same problem successfully. After that, they are going to analyze their own problems and try to find better solutions. Furthermore, they have to know the English terms of COVID-19 and other more vivid vocabularies in order to create a dramatic play. Finally, they are going to rehearse again and again so as to present a splendid dramatic story. During the whole process, each participant may have opportunity to become an expert of dealing with COVID-19. Moreover, what they may have obtained from this project may be knowledge of English language, different abilities and skills of using English, and a sense of responsibility to make commitment to the safety and the security of the community. They may become a creator and a designer of their healthy and a safe homeland. Since Dorothy's experiment, drama in education, drama in theater, educational drama, and applied drama have been created and used for education widely in the world. That is why the English class is also drama class in Britain today. At the same time, American drama educators have used creative drama to develop children's creativity. On the basis of a lot of pioneers of drama education, I started my experiment in English language teaching. What I have explored in English teaching is that both English and drama are used as media to develop students' 14 intelligences. The aim of English teaching is to nurture whole man or ideal man, rather than teaching English language alone. The students do drama activities without realizing clearly that they are learning English. For them, they are playing games. With this method, the students' English language skills are improved, and their 14 intelligences are also developed. Furthermore, the students will get not only pleasure and beauty, but also individuality and even individuation. So English language learning is not only a process of getting English language knowledge and improving English language skills any longer. It has become one process for language learners to grow up pleasantly, obtain beauty, and develop individuality. It has been one powerful and effective means to develop whole man. My talk is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Jiayang. Indeed, your comments on drama education and role-playing games in improving the motivation of students, I think is an excellent input for English teachers, especially for English teachers as a foreign language. And I think all the nations can learn much from China's massive approach towards online education and Xiamen University's online and physical mixture. So we hope to further gain your experiences in the future and maintain our communications with you. Thank you very much, Professor Jaya. This concludes our day 1 plenary sessions. We shall reconvene in about 5 minutes for the technical sessions. We're running a little over time at the moment, but I request